Welcome to our fourth and final panel, Crafting Performance. Jean-Baptiste Patois is conductor and professor of art education at the National Conservatory of Saint-Étienne. In July 2010, he was appointed music director of the International Academy of Choral Singing in Terra Pax. He is also artistic and pedagogic director of the Maîtrise de la Loi, a choir school, and president of Documenting 21C, a nonprofit organization which produces documentaries that illuminate musical social projects. Lona Larsson, one of Sweden's most distinguished conductors, is an innovative choral leader with strong musical integrity. In 1999, she founded the vocal ensemble Voces Nordicae, a prize-winning vocal ensemble from Stockholm consisting of 16 singers. Donald Nally is conductor of The Crossing, director of choral organizations at Northwestern University, and chorus master of the Chicago Bach Project. Francisco Nunez is a composer, conductor, visionary, leading figure in music education, and the artistic director and founder of the Young People's Chorus of New York City, renowned worldwide for its diversity and artistic excellence.
Hello, everybody. I am Jean-Baptiste from France, and if you want, we will make an experience of musical. Do you want to sing with us? Yes, thank you. The question is, please try to find in yourself a word, a poetic word, a beautiful word, a spiritual word, who can give a part of answer about the question how the choral practice can participate to change our life. Please find in your mind a beautiful and poetic word who can give an answer about this question. You can close your eyes if you want. And now, can you whisper the word, your word? With intensity, with spirituality, with a very high spiritual level. And now you can sing improvisation. Everybody, please. Can you make a loop, a loop?
Hello, I'm Francisco Nunez, very excited to be here. Beautiful singing. We decided since it's called Crafting Performance, we'd create a performance a little out of the box. Thank you for working with us there. So, in this panel, we've been challenged with the idea of creating an idea of what to do next. Is chorus music really working today? Is it hearing so much about it today, new audiences, new ways of doing it all? Does it really transform our lives? If so, whose life is being transformed? The composer, the conductor, the singers, or the audience? You know, I've been working now in the choral world, even though I look very young. I've been working in the choral world for nearly 30 years. You were supposed to laugh at that moment, and it did not work. Thank you, I didn't cue. I've been working in the choral world for nearly 30 years, and I've seen many changes. Enough changes to remain the same. I've watched the industry dissemble, recombine, and change, but basically, very little has changed. There's now greater visibility for choirs, as you heard from YouTube and even SoundCloud, but a decrease in fidelity because of the limitations of these platforms is making our listening change. I've seen choral composers infuse complicated rhythms, making music sound even more authentic from the countries that they're coming from. They're adding sophisticated stacked chords, creating clusters of crunch chords that eventually resolve, while others are writing even simpler music, formula-inspired creations that will be sold to the masses. I've seen a change from recordings of playlists that were putting together favorite pieces from different places to what's happening, composer-centric recordings. Concerts are changing too, from a playlist of songs tied together from a theme or what the conductor likes to put together. Now we are very much composer-centric in our concerts. It was theorized that at the peak of television, when you could not rewind, you could not record, when you saw a show, it disappeared. Of course, unless you used the VHS. Our attention spans got shorter because of the commercials. So our children were starting to not pay as much attention. Now, with the influx of Netflix, Hulu, HBO Go, Showtime, and Time Warner Cable, or what's out here, what's out in Connecticut, you guys, Charter, you're able to rewind. We can skip through the commercials. Through Netflix, we don't have to watch commercials at all. We can watch an entire show for 50 minutes and then get our food, come back and watch 6 of them. And we have this video binging that's happening. And I'm seeing a difference in our concerts as well. So I wonder if we're getting where we have marathon concerts that are longer, compositions that are longer. This listening binge might start to take off here. You know, more people are singing in choirs. Chorus America, I've heard ACDA twice, so I want to bring Chorus America in at this point. Chorus America has a study that says more and more people are indeed singing more. And because of that, they're involving more of their friends to come to concerts. So chorus music is not dead for those people. But I do think we need to rethink our approach to performance. We need to look at ways to evolve and be part of the time. For example, the first Pulitzer Prize in 1943 was given to William Schumann for stand and sing choral piece with orchestra. Then again in 1946 to Leo Sowerby for another stand and sing piece with orchestra. So the choir was very important. Then not until 2003 was a Pulitzer given for a choral piece. Opera was involved, so there is singing. But since 2003, 4 composers have won a Pulitzer for actual choral works, some of them a cappella. All 4 of these compositions rethought the performance. They use innovative techniques, descriptive writing paired with experimental ensembles that stretch the listener's concept of the choral art. These works are having a profound and immediate impact on performers and audiences today. The impact is a result of deliberate choices being made to craft the performance. It is what you want to say to an audience that's very important, and to whom you say it. We have a saying in our chorus, the University Glee Club that I conduct, you've paid really good money for this chorus, for this concert, so you better sing very well. Because we are still performing for ourselves in many, many ways. So how do we indeed bring in new audiences? At the so I want to say we are all going to share our experiences of what we do in our work in different parts of the world. And at the conclusion, we're going to do this a little bit differently. I've asked every presenter when they come up here, they're going to be responded by one of the other conductors to their work. So there'll be a little dialogue between the 2 of them. And at the end of the entire thing, we're hoping that you will be inspired in some way for some of this work to go to you. We hope our stories will give you further thought. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first panelist and our first improvisateur, Mr. Jean-Baptiste Patois.
I would like to speak with you about 2 experimental concerts. The first one is called Pablo Sharp 2. It was played with 4 companies, the children's choir school called Maîtrise de la Loire, that I am conducting now, the Quartet Novo, tuba, trombone, double bass, clarinet, the professional choir Résonance Contemporaine, and a percussionist band called Les Percussions du Trèfort. These percussionists are absolutely unique. They play all over the world, and all of them are persons with mental disability, Down syndrome, very low intellectual IQ, etc., and very, very high artistic potential. Pablo Sharp 2 was composed by Pascal Bern and programmed by 2 very important jazz festivals. This creation is inspired by Pablo Picasso. He was absolutely fascinated by the children's creativity, the creative child soul. That's why the presence of the color of children's voices was natural in this project. The show was a sort of kaleidoscope which mixed instrumental pieces with texts by Picasso and some of his friends, Max Jacob and Paul Eluard. The meeting between what we call handicap and what we commonly call normality creates a really rich situation.
The meaning of this concert was out of traditional concept. The presence of Down syndrome musicians requested to question each player of this project. First, the problem was just the fear about differences, the fear about Down syndrome. The real handicap was not the mental disability, but the difficulty in the society which promotes an elite test and standardized excellence to approach the issue of differences. The fear disappeared when we first heard the percussionists. They were in total artistic fusion and connection with Picasso's language, fully invested both physically and spiritually. They showed us the way to find the right relationship between the musical pieces and our inner self. Secondly, from the beginning of the project and up to the first concert, the investors of the project were a little bit uneasy with this situation. For them, the question, perhaps the first fear, was how to promote and how to sell a show with Down syndrome musicians in a professional festival of music. Hard question for them. The question was very hard because there was also a lot of money at stake. Finally, they decided not to consider the handicap in the communication strategy. They just made a publicity on the artistic content, Picasso. This choice was, in my opinion, a good one, because the experiment has probably been convincing for people who otherwise would not have showed up. For these people, this changed their idea of what is excellence. Third, it is really difficult to tell with words how big the audience reaction was. But I am sure that this concert raises in the mind of a lot of persons new questions about humanity. The mix of Picasso's language with percussionists, absolutely sincere, deeply artistic, without any artificial postures, caused a real introspection around the issue of the art concept and of the art practice. I would like now to speak with you about a second project. In July 2013 in Indonesia, for the Bali International Choir Festival, Professor Andre de Quadros asked us to invent a choreographic, instrumental, and choral form for the award ceremony of the competition. Before the presentation of the project, I would like to say one word about the cultural context. You know that Asia is absolutely fascinated by the Western world, based on consumption. Indonesia is a really multicultural and multi-traditional country, and we can observe that Western model tend to destroy cultural differences step by step. A lot of young persons totally ignore Indonesian traditional practices, to which they are not directly connected anymore. Many are disconnected from their own roots. We had to compose in 5 days a complex menu. First, ingredient, a young Indonesian choir composed of a good young singers. Jeans, they share very young. They had 20 years. They have jeans, iPad, Ray-Bans, and chewing gums. Second ingredient, a traditional orchestra of gamelan from Bali. Third ingredient, 2 traditional dancers and 2 soloist singers who live in Bali. Fourth ingredient, 4 Occidental musicians, Andre and Emily from USA, Lukasz from Italy, and me from France. The topic of the menu, the meeting between Western and Eastern cultures. For that, we use Shiva dance, themes of Mendelssohn psalms, and Balinese themes. To compose the menu, we used some notes of the gamelan. These notes reminded us about Mendelssohn themes, Haare of Gott and Richte mich Gott. We taught these themes to the percussionists. The Indonesian soloist singers, as for them, taught us traditional themes. The young singers learned the choreography of Shiva dance with Andre and dancers. Progressively, as all these cross-cultural transfers were put in place, the structure of the show was revealed to us. And the choir So the public is here. The public is here. This is the movement of the choir.
Tu vas avoir dans le public un chœur de 10 qui va chanter Richte mich Gott. Et en face, tu vas avoir un chœur de Kachak qui va rentrer. Donc ça va symboliser la rencontre entre la culture occidentale et la culture d'ici. Et on a deux danseurs indonésiens qui chantent, qui dansent, qui se réunissent autour de cette œuvre avec le gamelan en plus, les gongs et les deux solistes indonésiens. Où là, l'idée, c'est vraiment que cette rencontre se fait dans l'harmonie. Voilà. Donc là, aujourd'hui, comme je le disais, on va essayer de finaliser la forme et que ça soit surtout très très clair pour tout le monde. Voilà. Là, je pars apprendre Richte mich Gott aux musiciens. Can you try? It's difficult. I know. It's not in your language, but it's interesting because you never hear this sound. Yeah. It's difficult to make a sound that we never hear. Okay. Learn me a sound that I don't know. I want to try.
It's great when she and when Bagusi they sing Hara of God. So we are making a different kind of music together, a different kind of work, sharing ideas, sharing cultures, sharing this kind of experience, becoming closer to each other. People from Minahasa, people from Bali to come closer together, right? So the main things to concentrate for tomorrow are the detail.
The last day, we gave the concert in the Temple of Art in Bali. For me, it was more than a concert. At a spiritual level, it was like a window open into a cultural space where each of us was connected to different roots. Our roots, other roots, which without anything being altered, nourished a kind of tree well bred in a dynamic ecosystem. after the concert, young Indonesian singers were speaking with curiosity and appetite about traditional music of Bali. It was new for them. Let's emphasize the technical challenge which consists of handling multicultural elements and the huge dedication that everyone gave to practice and understand the language of each other. The context of the concert was also really interesting because the public was absolutely surprised and, for a part of it, perhaps a little bit provoked or even shocked by this original form. It is why I feel that this experience was in complete opposition to cultural globalization, which commercially promotes a destructive and tasteless conception of world music. This concert was really unique because each of us was like a tightrope walker on a wire. On the right side, the West. On the left, the East. In the middle, the wire, the present time. So something that words cannot say. Perhaps we touch something about a sacred dimension in this concert. Perhaps the human being needed to invent the conception of the concert to open a sacred space to exchange, to share, and to speak what words cannot say. Thank you.
Well, I first want to say that it is really a privilege to be in a room full of so many people doing such important work and so creatively. And that's a great example of that, because that is really very exciting. And I also find it very interesting that all through the day we've heard the same themes kind of emerge, not at the forefront of the different talks, but kind of in the midst of them. You know, these belonging things that we cannot say with words. You know, that I keep hearing these phrases over and over again, and it's affirming, but it's also thought-provoking. When I walked out at lunch, I saw this rather eccentric older gentleman, and he was doing what would appear to be his lunchtime very, very fast walk exercise. He was just really energetically walking down, and I sort of imagined, you know, and he looked a little crazy, you know, honestly, but he was just kind of, you know, by sort of what I'll call normal standards. I had this whole like vision of him, you know, having won the Nobel Prize a couple of weeks ago, and him being this like sort of, you know, really, you know, incredibly intelligent person who can't read social cues all that well. And I started thinking about, you know, this day made me think about, I wonder where music lies in his life. You know, I wonder where music lies in lots of different people's lives who I don't know, but I meet them, and you've kind of wondered, because it lies somewhere in everybody's life. And so to hear you talk about people who are intellectually challenged, engaging so thoroughly, and actually really at the root, it sounds like they were at the root of that project, that percussion quartet, is really, to me, kind of, you know, awe-inspiring, and also really, you know, my life doesn't involve that, so I'm very envious to view and to watch, you know, this richness. So if I had a question in my response to you, it would be to add. So these are dangerous topics. You know, when we talk about eccentric people and people who are intellectually challenged, and we have this. We've developed this whole vocabulary, and we have to watch ourselves, because of those of us that grew up 30 years ago had a different set of vocabulary, and we're constantly trying to formulate what is the appropriate vocabulary to make sure that our society is as inclusive as possible. So my question to you is, for that percussion quartet, with their intellectual challenges, what changes did you see when they engaged in music? I'm just curious to know that.
When? It's difficult to say that because I don't know what it changed for them, but I know what it changed for me. It's impossible to say what it changed for them. For me, it changed one thing really important in my way of musician. It's changed that I realized in this moment that the music, it's a language, but you know, everybody knows that. It's simple to say that. But the concept of language in music, it's really, really, really clear when we practice this experience. Because the language, it's not the words. The language, it's not the visual things. The language, it's not only the writing letters. The language, it's a vibration. The language, it's energy. And I realized that really deeply when I practice this experience.
Hi, I'm going to make it very simple for me. So now it's you guys that are going to do the work. And I want us to sing. This is a piece by a Swedish composer that died only a few years ago. Arne Melnes is the name. And we will be singing it in English. First, I want us to sing the melody together. After that, we will sing the tenor and bass part together. So now you can sit up in your chairs and be ready to sing. I just saw that it was impossible to see. As in water, face answers to face, so the heart of man reflects the man. comes the real challenge. Now I want you to stand up and sing. Yee-hee! You too. Here you go. And ladies first. That was beautiful. I like that. Thank you very much. And now everyone is awake. It's not even a week ago. It was last Wednesday. I had the privilege and the real challenge, I have to say, of being part of a project with El Sistema, which is a program that runs around the world, and I'm sure many of you have heard about it before. And it runs a little bit different in different parts of the world, and it is starting, I would say, in Stockholm right now. And in Stockholm it is used, the system, as integrating refugees and newly come to Sweden people and children, so that they get to dance and sing and do social projects to learn Swedish faster and to make a lot of music together. And this project, I was kind of involved with it because it was a project mixed with the Swedish radio choir, which is, I have to say, the absolute best choir in Sweden we have. And that was, of course, very difficult because you had a fantastic professional, huge choir, and you had 12 kids from many different parts of the world who only one of them was born in Sweden, but some of them had only been there for maybe 1 year. And we were going to make a project together. We called it a project about friendship. So that was our theme. And in very little time, we built up a performance built on both animation, where the kids had been drawing, and then we speeded up the film. So it was artwork in animation, and the kids had been also, walking around in a shopping mall and telling about the meaning of life to each other. So we made a film with that, and then together with the Swedish Radio Choir. And my assignment, you could say, was also to introduce music to these kids which they would not have been introduced to had we not had this project. So I chose this piece of music, which is not major and minor, and which is a fantastic piece composed-wise. I mean, the text is even shown in how it is composed, right? So, and we made a lot of nice exercises with this. And then I had this fantastic little girl. She was 9 years old, Suljana. She came from Eritrea and had only been in Sweden for 1 year. And she was standing in front of the radio choir and in front of her friends and doing this, that you did, when they were singing. And she was a very shy girl who could hardly speak. I mean, her Swedish was very hard to understand, or is very hard to understand. But all of a sudden, this was so much communication. Because, I mean, all these adult singers, they were totally moved by this little girl who was standing and doing all these movements. And they were following her, and the atmosphere was so thick in the room that you could cut it. And that was really an amazing moment for me, because I had to create meetings in very, very limited time. And for me, that was really a meeting. And I don't think anyone in the radio choir or Suljana will ever forget that. So that was really a special moment for all of us. So we did the speed version today. You got the speed version. When it comes to my work with Voces Nordica, the best way to describe what I do with Voces Nordica is please come to the concert on Thursday. Please do, because then it will be easier to understand what we do. Some years ago, we started just by walking in the room and were asked, does any song appear? And that thought made a whole performance. So sometimes we do not know anything, and I, as a conductor, really do not know what the result will be in the end, because for me, it's very important to have the input of everyone. So there are three main things that I always consider when working with Voces Nordica. One is, how do I look upon my singers? How do we look upon our choral singers? Do we look on them as reproductive singers, so that they reproduce something that has been made, or do we look upon them as co-creating singers, which is a little bit of a difference, I would say. In my studying and the way I have been trained, I felt that I was getting a little bit more and more into a box, and I didn't like it so much. So where it was more and more that I was using singers to reproduce something that I, as a conductor, had a goal of, which can be a very good thing, let me just say that. But for me, it is much more creative process if the singers are co-creating the whole process. So we work a lot with improvisation, because improvisation, it is impossible for me to control, and I like that. I like to not know the answers. I think it's a very creative way of working. So that's one thing. Then also, how do we look upon the audience? Is the audience there just because they happen to be in the same room as we when we are up here building our own sphere? Or are we really creating something for the audience? Are they the main reason for why we stand on stage? I am one of the most naive persons in the world, so many years ago I had the thought that if I could just make one be moved by a concert I did, so that that person might go from the concert and help maybe an elderly woman over the street, so that she would go home and be extra kind to her grandchildren, so that they will grow up and make the world around them just a little bit better. That was, I do believe that that's the way our music can make a difference. And so for me, the focus on the audience is very, very important. And just one thought, have you ever thought about why do we do the applause in the end? For whom do we do the applause? Is it for our sake? Is it because, oh, look how good we were now and now we are worth the applause? Or is the focus on the audience? Because the audience needs to give something back for the balance to be good. So it's and for me, it's very important to know how the singers think about that when they stand on stage. It's very important for me to know that where are your focus? You're not standing there just to be, whoa, whoa. You're standing there because the audience have a need to give something back so that the balance is good. Because we are nothing without the audience. So it's very important to think, I think, for me, it is very important to think about these things. So that was the singer and the audience, and then the conductor. Why do we do what we do? Is it for our sake? Is it for the singer's sake? Or for the audience's sake? Maybe a little bit of all of it. And maybe for some higher reasons for some of us. But there is this thing, as a conductor, it's very important for me, as I said, to not be able to control everything, because then creativity will happen automatically. But if you are very controlling as a conductor, you can kill creativity, is my opinion. And we need to keep that alive for music to be good. And I truly do believe that this is not the most beautiful part of a concert. So I always stand behind the audience to conduct, because I often feel that the conductor is in the way. The conductor is in the way for the communication that the singers wants to do, and also in the way for the experience of what the singers are giving. So I stand behind the audience to conduct. In good days, you create a spiritual kind of feeling in the whole room when you are standing behind the audience instead. So this about focus for the singer, for the audience, and for the conductor is very, that is how we start when we work. We have done many different projects. We are very happy and proud to be part of the Conducting 21st C, which we have been from the beginning, and this is a fantastic job that we are very happy to be part of. And we do shows, you could say, choral shows, where we use classical music to make scenic performances, and we do work for climate opera and different statements, you could say. But we only rehearse twice a month. And for that to be possible, we have to do so that we present the music and then the singers learn it all on their own. Because we have to both make music and the staging in this very, very limited time. But the good thing is that the singers think it's a lot of fun. So I actually never have to say, now you have to go home and do your homework. Please, you have to do this. You must know this piece by next time. I never do that. If somebody did not do the homework, somebody else of the singers will say, but we can't work. We can't do this if you don't do it at home. So I'm very privileged in that way. But I think it is because the singers feel that they can affect what we are doing. They can really have an impact on the work that we are doing. So for me, it is a lot of fun because we play and we make crazy stuff, and I never know what the result will be, and I kind of like that. So, but come to the concert. That is the easiest way to describe it.
Jean-Baptiste has asked me to respond because it's English, but
It's wonderful.
I think it's quite wonderful. So improvisation. I noticed you also were off book just now, being
yes.
improvisational. So when you're working with a new audience like this, what do you is the feeling going through you? Is it because I know the feeling going through me was fear. Of what to expect. But you, when you're trying to teach others to do this, how do you overcome that feeling?
Well, I was nervous back there,
Oh, you
but
were?
now when I'm here, I have to say it's curiosity. So when I was sitting there and Jean-Baptiste was presenting, I was looking at all of you and I thought, wow, what a wonderful bunch of people. Wonder how they are doing today. And it's curiosity. So, yeah, that's... Yeah.
Thank you very much. I usually am off book as well. However, I'm not today. I have spoken publicly about 4 times in the last 3 months, and I'm smiling about this. My father died 2 months ago, and about a week after that, I was supposed to give a 25-minute talk at Northwestern of some conference about programming, and it somehow went completely off the rails, and I wound up like the culmination was that I pronounced that it wasn't my responsibility to teach the Western canon, which, as you can imagine, didn't go over all that well with the faculty. So, and then last week I was in Philadelphia and I was speaking after a contemporary music concert, and the person who was moderating was very proud of the last piece, which I thought was just really a piece of crap. And so he said, "Isn't it so exciting? What do you think about this level of progressiveness? And I said, well, actually, all 5 pieces on this program are incredibly traditional, including the one that was a world premiere." And again, you could hear the whole audience just get. So I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna read my notes, okay? Because something's going on up here that I don't quite get. When Jeff asked me to address, I asked Jeff what he'd like me to talk about, and he said, please speak about these 2 areas of my work. The first is to share some thoughts about presentation, which is in some ways what we've been talking about on this panel. Ways in which the Crossing and the choirs at Northwestern have produced works while reimagining spaces, incorporating other mediums, or simply asking what is a concert in 2015? What is its purpose? How do we meet that purpose? And I ask that question every year. The second is to discuss the role, and here I will quote Jeff because he has a very particular sensitive way of putting this. The role I feel new music can play a part in society's examination of larger non-musical ideas. I think he means that I commission a lot of socio or politically motivated pieces, and he figures it's better for me to talk about that than anybody else because it's a dangerous topic. I am going to apologize. I'll just skip that. This session demonstrates that ensembles I conduct are certainly not alone in rethinking what a choral concert is. I mean, both of these are beautiful examples of rethinking what a choral concert is. It's amazing. I'm smiling. And the truth is, watching a bunch of people sing is not really the most interesting thing in the world. And I agree, watching someone's butt while that happens is even less interesting. So Singers, do tend to be gregarious, physically expressive, and often distracted while you're conducting them. But I don't feel that music or concerts need to be apologetic about that for being visually static. I'm sure most of us in this room find live music to be compelling on its own. But if we are going to find our own voice as creators, or like conductors are, recreators, then we must ask ourselves, in what way does our art reflect our world? That art exists to help define it, to better understand it, to bridge the gap between our conscious and our subconscious, to mark and manipulate time, to create spaces in which we recognize our own emotions in others, to provide recognizable gestures that work on our memory, and ultimately to make a connection that we all long for and apparently need. We do this through stories, and it is how we tell those stories that defines us and indeed defines each concert. So because I am visual, and because I recognize how strong the visual is affected by the oral, any film goer knows that, my ensembles often incorporate visual elements and put them in spaces that invite a certain kind of thought about the journey the listener is experiencing. I think it's very important, for example, to define whether or not we intend the space within which the music is heard, whether it is designed to be an extension of the outside, a formalized and ritualized temple, whether it is like Peter Brook's empty space, which we will temporarily occupy, or a space purposefully detached from the rest of our lives. In our productions, we tend to avoid using visuals as adornments. I don't like going to concerts of the Vivaldi Four Seasons and being subjected to slides of the Pennsylvania autumn hillsides. That is certainly not what Vivaldi's music is about. Sometimes these extra musical elements, and I hate that term, but I don't know another one, grew out of practical necessity. Recently, we did a premiere of John Luther Adams' work, which we commissioned in Philadelphia's Icebox, which is a kind of cavernous industrial cathedral with an enormous projection screen of about 100 by 30 feet. The piece is in 14 movements, and even though it is very beautiful and is about sun, moon, stars, birds, and a general love of the natural world, and we'll get back to the natural world in a minute, it requires the singers to repeat the same music for 5-minute intervals at a time over the course of an hour, and it is completely exhausting. And you have to take breaks between movements, or eventually the whole thing will just go in the trash. So we designed an abstract design to play during the movements, just a kind of background visual that is actually based on our logo, although you can't tell that. And between the movements, then, flocks of starlings, emulating what we're sort of singing about, would suddenly appear in these huge, enormous screen coming at you, and give us about 20 seconds of something very visual to follow while we drank water and coughed, and just reset. And I'm going to show that now, I think. There we go. This is can we bring the, sorry. This is an example of that. And I will be very honest with you, this is, John Luther Adams' music is very quiet and very, very long and slow, and the photographer kept saying to me, I can't get you just won't conduct, I can't get anything out of you. So this is my demonstration of a very, very quiet, slow passage, staged for the photographer. At any rate, while we are in the Icebox in Philadelphia, I'll share another slide, which is music and visuals were imagined together for Frances White's The Third Night, which is based on a fragmented, suggested, but inconclusive text. Her partner, James Pritish, designed a film for it. Neither of these two elements are really independent, and they need each other to work. This is a photograph from that piece. Before we leave John Luther Adams, I'll share another staging of a work you may have heard of. This is Sela, The Breath of the World, which was premiered at Lincoln Center last summer and wound up being on the cover of the New York Times. There are 80 musicians in this piece, and we decided to place the singers at the center of the players and the audience in the reflecting pool on Hearst Plaza. It was really quite magical, and these musicians were the lucky ones because it was very hot in New York, and they were standing in the water. This is true also of a fantastic piece of Chris Jonas, who worked with artist Dan Cole on a project we commissioned called The Gulf Between You and Me, based on the Deepwater Horizon disaster. In it, singers mirrored movements in the slowly progressing animation of this 40-minute work, with images ranging from the view from the bridge of the Rig to the beaches that would eventually be destroyed by that disaster. This may not read very well, but that's floor to ceiling, and it has some of the text in it. And then the next one, in the light here you can't really see that, but it is an animated picture of the beach. Another practical issue came up when we did Joby Tablet's Path of Miracles, which probably most of you know. When we first presented in 2009, I was insistent that the audience not spend their entire times looking at their lap reading the text, and there's a whole lot of text. I felt they would not experience the movement in the piece nor the perseverance expressed in Joby's journey within and without in that piece. And they wouldn't do that if they were just staring at the text. So we designed super title projections that capture the feeling of each of the movements, and then you can see the Latin is in the background and the English is in the foreground. And it really gave a feeling of the piece, of the movement itself, and also allowed you to have a sort of super title where you don't have to stare. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm skipped ahead. Oh, now I'm really bad. Okay. You guys, you knew that was going to happen at some point, right? So the last one is just a short picture of Lost Objects, the Bang on a Can piece by Michael Gordon, David Lang, and Julia Wolfe, which we just completed at Northwestern. And that's just to give you an idea of some of the stuff we're doing at Northwestern. Another super title solution that I didn't want people staring into their laps all the time, or they wouldn't really experience the expressiveness of the piece. Now, I realize that we're running late, and I will move as quickly as we can to briefly discuss social issues. In 1940, the great American playwright William Saroyan wrote in his introduction to an edition of his play, Something with a Soldier, quote, "Art and politics must move closer together. Reflection and action must be equally valid in good men if history is not to take one course and art another. The weakness of art is that great poems do not ennoble politics, as they certainly should, and the trouble with politics is that they inspire poets only to mockery and scorn. We have always believed that art should be one thing, religion one thing, politics one thing, morality one thing, and so on. This kind of isolation of entities, while convenient, is, I believe, foolish. All things must come together as one, which is man. The functioning of all things should be to the glory of living. Art is answerable to politics, and politics is answerable to religion, and all are answerable to man, so that when there is disgrace in life, as there is now, we are all guilty." This quote has really defined a large part of my work. It has inspired me daily, and I reread it often to remind myself of my own responsibility. I realize that it is a controversial subject, particularly because political art often fails to be either political or art, because the bias producing it destroys the possibility for connection with the other. This is why it is so important to tell stories in our art. We, the artists that comprise the ensembles I conduct, are not averse to following our collective bias. Point of view is essential to great art and is frankly lacking from some contemporary musical performances, both interpretively and culturally. This was hinted at earlier in Anton's panel and in discussions of some performances that we hear. The whole notion that we can reach more people by making things more palatable is just wrong, and the church has proved that. The author of an interview in a magazine recently said, somebody who interviewed me recently said that my concerts are designed to make a statement and to educate, and I objected to both because that's not the way I think of this. That's not what Saroyan is saying. In fact, I am unflinching on this topic. I don't like the idea, or I cannot stand the idea, that musicians are educators. And I don't mean in the education, I don't mean in the academy, I mean as musicians. We're entertainers. We attempt to define our world so that the listener can recognize themselves in it and respond. That's what art is. The Crossings work reflects my own loves, biases, and concerns, and by default, the artists involved embrace this on a certain level. However, we are here to better understand our emotional lives through the curious way in which a combination of vibrations in the air works on our memories and moves us to laughter or to tears. End of story. So how are we approaching this? Very quickly. Recent commissions have included Ted Hearn's Sound from the Bench, which is based upon the Supreme Court's Citizen United case in which they establish corporate personhood. Ted took excerpts from Jenna Osmond's poetry based on the cases leading to the Citizens United, tracing the slow and sneaky emergence of a person with a first name like Exxon or Monsanto. He set the words of the choir in a variety of styles in relief against two guitars, electric guitars, and drum set. So no matter how loud the choir sings, the machine, those mechanical guitars, can always play louder. The Gulf Between You and Me, and that's the gulf between you and me, was a three-composer, three-night work. The title comes from my desire to make a piece, one of many now, about the environment, which I believe is the single most important issue of our time. And apparently, this now puts me in strange alliance with the Pope, which I'm very proud of. So I knew it was going to happen. Well, I guess actually there's been a couple of other things that he and I agree on lately. So, but you can't make a piece about an oil slick, really. So we invited Pierre Jaurès to create a three-part poem, one part for each composer, that tells stories about the people involved, in particular the story of the wife of one of the 11 who died on the rig. Gene Coleman combined this with the sounds of Fukushima and the sounds of the traditional Japanese instrument, the sho, as well as Toshi Nakamura's exotic electronic sound world for one of the pieces. Chris Jonas, as we have said, created a multifaceted piece in which the choir appears in sound layers throughout, both physically and orally. And Gabriel Jackson wrote a work that conjured rather extraordinary anger and is shockingly moving as a result. We often do works that reference the beauty of our natural world and the increasing distance we are from it in our human-centric environment. The late and great poet Philip Levine once said something like, "By describing the beauty of a lake, we politicize it because that lake is for sale, just like the sky and the land and everything else." This is why I am so attracted to the music of Santa Ratnietsa, a brilliant Latvian, and her soundscapes that reproduce the sounds of lakes and woods through a kind of cloud with an underlying suggestion of tonal gestures. We see this a lot in recent so-called postmodern works, a quote from music from an earlier time or a recognizably Renaissance harmonic gesture that defines and magnifies the distance we are from those gestures and indeed from our world. I'm going to skip just a little bit about another project, but if you want to ask me about it later, I'll talk to you about 7 Responses, which involves Buxtehude's Jesu Membra Nostri and ice and a Baroque band and 7 composers writing new works. And it's really crazy and wild and wonderful. I will close with a reflection on what we are actually doing when we program and present. World peace is, in fact, never going to be reached through music. Otherwise, that would have happened 1,000 years ago, and we wouldn't be constantly identifying new enemies to give us national identity. We wouldn't be dealing with our national guilt by invading things, and etc. Music plays an astonishing role in our lives. That's why we're here. It is apparently so integral. It's actually inexplicable. Is it not, however, it is not truly a universal language because it is so cultural. Love, and I just said that word, love, is a powerful force. And I am fortunate enough to be surrounded by love the way I know that you are in your choirs and in your families of choirs, in the form of artists all the time, with the Crossing, Northwestern, the Bach Project, the different people that I visit. We can say a lot in the stories we tell, and with the manner in which we present those stories, as long as we are disciplined to remember that our job, I think, is to express our inner lives as the composer's advocates.
Donald, that was quite beautiful, and those photographs are wonderful. We are basically out of time, and there's one more presentation. But I want to just take a moment to ask you, you are using your singers as a pathway to reach the audience. And you're using, for a better word, political art in some ways, with where these composers are creating a mission-based piece of some kind that they've chosen to represent society. is it a job for your singers, or do they get passionate, as you just did, when they work with you?
You know, I think that, honestly, the music that the Crossing does, and let's talk about the Crossing right now.
That's what I'm talking
I think the music that the Crossing does is so extremely difficult. Well, I mean, not always, but it's often so difficult that it takes a lot of outside work. And, you know, there's, so there was I heard a discussion of professionals talking about this professional. I sort of overheard a discussion of talking about professional or singers earlier, and about the whole show, you know, amateur and professional thing. And I actually don't necessarily agree with that. I think the problem with professional singers is not that they don't absolutely love it; it's that their hearts get broken by being in situations that don't inspire them. And I've seen it over and over and over again. And you put them in front of a conductor who just lets them, allows them to feel like they're participating, that they're not some sort of, you know, slave, singing machine to present someone else's viewpoint, and they just, they melt. They just change immediately. And so I think that you have to be invested in the product. You have to be invested in new music. You have to be invested in the amount of work that's involved. What I was going to say is that, there's, in an opera house, basically, nobody memorizes outside the opera house. Every single minute is paid for. And there's an argument to be made for that, but there's an argument to be made against that as well. And so you can't do the work that the Crossing does on that dime because there's no budget in the world that could possibly do that. So I would say that I have 100% inclusion because we just all love what we do. And the group is really, the group is still very democratic, actually. So we don't have time to go into that, but at some other point.
Well, that's wonderful to hear because it brings out the whole day about do we love music as chorus. There's one more presentation. It's 4:30. Would you give me 5 minutes to do one more piece? Is that good? I will keep it short. What is exactly the idea of craft and performance for New York City? It's interesting. We use the word excellence today. We use the word outreach, togetherness, otherness. We are creating silos of people that move from community to present their fragmented worlds. And these fragmentations are moving more rapidly than they did 15 years ago. 15 years ago, they were stagnant. More than 15 years ago, thousands of years. This was my choir. This was my identity. I will sing for me. I will sing for you. Do not invite others. Membership only. I will pay to sing to keep others out. The membership was restricted with them. Now, something amazing is happening. This conference, we are here. We are the amazings. We really are. Our silos are moving. There's a small tornado of energy and musical form that is allowing us to come together and bounce. And I think the bouncing is coming quicker. And eventually, we're going to snap together. And that's when I think extraordinary change is going to definitely happen. And it's happening already. Can it happen in the choral world? In the word outreach, I love that we don't use it. I love the idea of bringing together. And excellence is the key point. If you want the best. You want the best car, the best house, the best other person. You can buy it. Why not? You've worked very hard, it's yours. If you don't have, you accept. You have no other choice. You will deal with a bad teacher, a bad conductor, bad music, because that's what you have. Imagine bringing those two worlds together. There's only one way to do it. Excellence. Excellence will attract the best. And then excellence can then move and get the other. And when you bring those two extremities together, you will have something that's different. The silos come together, and music becomes something for the community of people that are not supposed to be there. In my opinion, it's much easier for me to go to Washington Heights and start a choir. They'll come. I can go to Harlem and start a choir. They'll come. There's no one else doing it. But let me go to the Upper East Side and get young girls going to private schools to come together. I better prove that I have something they don't have. And now I'm going to convince them to sing with a different class of people. Dominican Republic, the upper class and the servant class singing together. Very difficult. Immigrants in Europe singing with citizens. One of the most difficult things happening right now in Europe. How do we bring those two classes together? Those silos. We can continue to sing for each other, and as I said, the movement is great. Excellence brought us to the presidents when we sang for 9/11. And I was able to bring the extremes together proudly, and they love each other. They support each other, and they listen to each other. The word that I heard over here sung at the very top, listen. Because that's all we want to do, is listen. You want desperately to change the world. You wouldn't be here if you did not want to change the world. And you want to use the one thing you love more than anything else. Well, besides your wife and your children. Music. Because you know what it did for you. These children want it so badly, but they don't want crappy music. They want amazing music. Just because you're poor doesn't mean you have to be bad. Transient Glory is a program that I created in 2001 to bring the composers that never wrote for this population before, children. So now we went from getting all these composers to write to having an entire spotlight, entire evening of their music, and then beyond giving a 2-hour presentation of one composer's music, adding lighting and all kinds of visuals behind it. I'm going to go very quickly. Here are the children in Japan singing and moving and dancing, using movement to entice them on a piece that every middle school choir sings. So that has to be something they can live with. And the audience is completely freaked out at this point because the children are screaming on stage. But then they come in and they do other kind of movement. I'm going to cut through this. And then we can get the idea of bringing 3,500 children together in a concert conducted last week at the Prudential Center. Children are that desperate, they're willing to come together. This concert is being replicated again next year, 5 times. We expect 8,000 children in each concert. It's called Young Voices America. And the music is everything. Billy Joel's band is basically playing with them, and they're singing everything from Living on a Prayer to Matilda to classical music. Children want excellence in what they do. Here's a piece where we incorporate the audience in the work, where they surround us, where we were celebrating Terry Riley's 80th birthday. Terry Riley is writing for children, with the Jack Quartet. They believe in this. So the idea of creating this, it comes from excellence. Remember, who's singing? Kids that can't afford a token, Metro card, I always use my age, a Metro card to get home, with hedge fund kids. Here they are singing with a dance company, leaving our complete genre of choral music, going to the dance world, Stephen Petronio Company, and we had 150 children surround the entire block, singing as the audience is coming in, and then we walked in singing. The last thing I will leave with you is that the children desperately want to be great artists. And if you can get composers to write for them in a very wonderful way, extended works, we will bring excellence to every type of child that's out there. But we have to educate our conductors, our audiences to respect young people, to respect all kinds of people, to come together on a journey of excellence.
Undo in Europa. Undo in no parata udue.
And that's it for me. I want to say thank you to our panel. Lorna, you're supposed to respond to me, but I'm afraid that some of these people...
You're great.
Oh, there you go. Thank you very much.